I'm going to bring up the economic calendar because this week we had some pretty good economic news come out that, you know, the way that the economy is not like a speedboat. It's not like one of those cigarette boats that they run, you see in Miami Vice running between Cuba and Miami, right? It's not one of those. The economy is a huge tanker that takes a long time to respond to changes, fiscal changes and monetary changes. So let's take a quick look. We got our consumer price index on Tuesday. We got our producers price index. So these are price measurements of retail inflation and wholesale inflation. Then we got the retail sales numbers on Thursday as well. And then later in the day, we actually got what's happening with manufacturing output. So if I could just take a quick look at each one of these, consumer price index, SIP, um, it's tame, right? It's coming down and it's at that level that the Fed had been hoping for. Maybe not, it seems to have dropped significantly in the last 2 or 3 months. So maybe not in the way the Fed wanted to get there, right? The Fed didn't want to sacrifice the economy for inflation. The Fed wanted to do like little tweaks here and there to slow it down slowly instead of slam on the brakes. But this is where the Fed wanted it to be. In fact, if you take a look at the next interest rates, right? You know, June, there was a slight chance that there would be an interest rate drop. Well, no, the Fed is not thinking of slowing interest rates anymore. At least that's the investor sentiment. Maybe in July, right? But you can see this is an interest rate drop. This is keeping the boat where it is. And this has changed over the last week and a half to even in July, not seeing an interest rate drop. And then in September, okay, September, somewhere July, September is the current thinking that there would be an interest rate drop. It's moved, it's moved. It used to be May, June. Now it's, July, September. And by the time we get to December, we were before thinking maybe by the end of the year, a 3/4 point to a 1 point drop in interest rates. Now we're thinking more of a 0.5 point to a 3/4 point drop in interest rates. So the Fed is looking to not make these extreme adjustments anymore, mainly because things are kind of under control, but there's still that wild card with fiscal policy. But now take a look at what's happening here. If I take a look at producers price index, this is wholesale inflation, we're actually seeing some, you know, deflation, not even deflation, but when you see these negative numbers, you're seeing actually constriction or recessionary type moves. So that's what's happening at the wholesale level, that, goods are just not moving. Maybe the stuff that's moving at the retail level is stuff that was in inventory, right? In storage. So people are buying that stuff, but makers are not selling stuff to the retailers anymore, right? The retailers aren't placing orders. In fact, then we take a look at retail sales over April, and they're very anemic. Compare that to what we saw in March. So, March, all these tariffs were announced, but they weren't going to be put in place till April, and it caused a huge run up of people going and buying stuff that they were going to buy that stuff later in the year. And they're like, I better buy it now before tariffs are in place. So we had a huge increase in retail sales in March, but in April, I mean, the levels didn't change. So even people are like, okay, I'm going to stop purchasing right now. And then finally, industrial production, kind of like that wholesale inflation. I mean, it's flat. So, you know, pe- things have slowed down and it's trickling through the system. And it just got, it takes a month or two of moving these dials. So now, we've got this whole thing with China, and the trade war supposedly coming to an end. It's not coming to an end. It's been put on hold for 90 days, right? And in addition, the tariffs before and after, the US now has 30% tariffs on China. That wasn't there before the trade war started. And China has 10% tariffs on the US, and that's only good for the next 90 days. But 30% tariffs is significant. For every dollar you buy of China goods, you're going to have to pay $1.30. You're now going to pay an additional 30 cents to the US government for what you got before. So even though it's down off of this crazy number of 145%, it's still at 30%. So things are going to be, pricey.